Hey, everybody. Welcome to Southland's Parenting Podcast. That is the creative name that I've decided to endow upon this podcast, where we are trying to impress upon parents what must be impressed upon their kids. You cannot give what you don't have. How do you like that?
I love it.
There.
It's good.
I worked real hard on that. See, here's the thing, because everything within me, and we'll talk about this here in a minute, is I wanted to use the word imprinted or impressed or etched, and we'll talk about where that comes from. But it sounds kind of goofy, like the impressed podcast or the imprinted podcast or the etched podcast. So I was just like, how about we just call it the parenting podcast? So if you're a parent out there, you kind of know what it's for, and so
easy to find.
Yeah, but that is the essence of it. We believe you can't give what you don't have. And so we first want to focus on what needs to be impressed on parents' hearts so that you can impart that or impress that, etch that upon your kids. And so here's who I have with me today. I have some podcasting veterans.
Oh,
I am not a podcasting veteran.
You are. The beautiful thing about the podcasting world is you engage in time travel. Nobody really knows. Like, number one, we don't know when people are listening to this. This could be like, 2042. There could be somebody out there. You never know.
You can be dead by then.
All we know is it's not going to be listened to in the past, unless you're in some multiverse thing going on.
Teleport.
And also, they don't know when we recorded this because we're not going to tell them. And so, you at the point of the listening to this podcast are a podcasting veteran, Jess McKinney.
Yeah.
And Scott Hatfield. I have Scott Hatfield here with me, who's my faithful friend who took the baton from me in the Locker Room podcast and runs Southland's Podcast for Men. So
you use the word veteran really loosely, buddy. It's a real loose term. Sophomore,
I don't know how long you got to be in Major League Baseball before you get the veterans.
I don't know.
I think it's 11 years. Y'all are shy of that.
You did Locker Room for 5, buddy. 5.
5 long years.
And I'm a season in going, how did he do it for 5?
And now you know why I handed it to you.
That's right. It's a lot, man. It's cool.
Why don't we go here real quick before we kind of dive into the content of this introductory episode? Why don't you guys share a little bit about your journey into the parenting world? Maybe talk a little bit about the family you grew up in, and then the family that you've established, and maybe what's been a challenge for you as a parent.
Sure.
Why don't you go first, Scott?
Me?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. I grew up in the perfect home.
Perfect
as a child.
Yep. We all know that.
No. My mom had me when she was 14. My dad was 19. They got married. It was a long uphill climb. Divorced when I was in early high school, and sent me spinning lots of different directions. I didn't know the Lord. Came to know the Lord when I was a junior in high school, and just have been trying to really work on letting God heal me through all that process. And so been married to my wife, Sarah, for just in June, 29 years. I can't even believe it. It's been the ride of her life.
Oh, wow.
She will hear this podcast, and you'll hear about it the minute you get home.
That's right. And for us, we got married, did ministry in Louisville at Northeast Christian Church, came here in 99. Had no children, been married 8 years, battled infertility after a couple of years, which is a grueling process. But eventually, God answered our prayers, and we got pregnant. 10 years later, I moved to Seattle, battled with cancer, my wife, lots of things. Couple miscarriages, eventually led us back to a place where God had called us originally before we had our oldest daughter, who's now 21. Her name's Avery, married now. Went back to adoption, and so we went down that road and adopted a little girl from birth in Seattle. Same day, we found out that my wife was pregnant at age 40. It's crazy, man.
Yeah.
I couldn't write it. So we have 3 girls. I'm a girl dad, and I'm not. People like the last one. The people were like, "Hey, I hope you have a boy," and it's like, I'm good.
Yeah,
I'm good. And so, it's been a joy. They're both 11 now.
Yeah,
and excited about what God's doing in them. Yeah,
Jess.
Well, my story is a little bit the polar opposite of yours. I grew up here at Southland, and my parents both attended and were very involved. So I was definitely raised knowing who the Lord was and with really solid values, which I'm very thankful for. I did get married very young. I was 20, and my mom wasn't super thrilled, I don't think, but 18 years later, here we are. So we're
All right, dog.
yeah.
Take that.
I
That's
know. Now she's like, oh, we love him. But I know that I made them real nervous. So it's fine. But Chuck was 24. We were still in college. So we waited a long time to have kids. I do remember Mom saying, am I going to have grandchildren ever? And I was like, yeah, we're just not ready
That's not
yet.
even passive aggressive. That's
No,
just
she
aggressive.
just wondered. I mean, we had to have been at least 6 or 7 years into marriage, and she was just like, but I was 29 when we started trying, and I had my first at 30. And so we have 2 girls now. I have a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old, and we were lucky to have easy pregnancies, not easy labors, but other than that, it's been somewhat of a dream, which is great. Now we're navigating how do I actually raise these kids the way that my parents raised me and not mess it all up. So,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
One of the reasons I wanted you two specifically on this podcast is because between the three of us, there's points of similarity and commonality, but there's also a lot of diversity in regards to our experiences, both kind of growing up and then into parenting, So I got married super young too. We've talked about that before. I was 20. Allie was cougar. She was 21, and way older woman.
So much more mature.
Actually not even a year older, but every year when she's, for 6 months out of the year when she's older than me, I like to point it out. And so we set out to wait about 5 years to have kids, and both of us definitely wanted kids. I said 2 because I was an only child, and that seemed like a lot. Like, man, I mean, that doubles what I
One's a lot.
experienced, And she wanted 4, and we ended up with 4. So weird how that works, She didn't have to do a lot of convincing, So, she got pregnant a couple of years in, had a miscarriage, and interestingly, when that happens right out of the gate, you start to have all those questions like, what does that mean? A lot of people don't talk about it, and so it was a really painful experience for both of us. And so we walked through that, and then, when she became pregnant again, we were, just petrified. And so, you get those first few ultrasounds way back in the day when all they gave you was like the little whale sound, thing, but that heartbeat, I'll never forget hearing Landy's heartbeat for the first time and all that kind of thing. And so subsequently, we ended up having then 3 boys after Landry, so they are 20, 17, 14, and 10 at the time of this recording, even if so take that with your time travel. But anyway, I keep all their ultrasounds. I was actually showing this to a member of our staff the other day. I've got all these ultrasounds of the kiddos in here, and you can tell when our insurance changed because with one of them, it
got better.
It got better. So and it was Eli actually in the middle, which is super funny. But this is all of them in there. But that's Eli.
Some 3D.
3D. We must have had good insurance here at Southland at the time. But he's got his arms raised and his mouth open like a little warrior or something. So of course, from before birth, he's always been that way. So
that's cool, man.
But anyway, that's been kind of our journey into parenting, and I wanted to, now that I've lost my place in my Bible because I turned over there, but I want to go to Deuteronomy. This is a super interesting passage, and it's Deuteronomy chapter 6. And I'll just read this to you. It says this, and just to give a little bit of context, Moses is about to die, and Deuteronomy is basically this big long speech before they go into the promised land, and he's basically telling them, like, listen, y'all, don't forget. Don't forget all the stuff that God's walked us through. Don't forget all the ways he's rescued us. Don't forget all the things he's taught us. Don't let go of this law that he's given us. Like, don't, he's basically going, don't screw it up when you go into the promised land, So one of the things he continues to come back to is this. So he says, these are the commands, decrees, and laws the Lord your God directed me to teach you to observe in the land that you're crossing the Jordan to possess, so that your children and their children after them may fear the Lord your God as long as you live by keeping all these decrees and commands that I give you, and so that you may enjoy a long life. And this is the real famous part. Hear, O Israel, and be careful to obey, so that it may go well with you, and that you may increase greatly in the land flowing with milk and honey, just as the Lord, the God of your fathers, promised you. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be upon your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, and when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. And he basically kind of reiterates almost word for word the same thing over in chapter 11. So what stands out to me is that Moses makes clear, like, it's not just about you driving these things into the hearts of your children. This has to first be driven deep into your own heart. And so that's why, as I introduced the podcast, I wanted to emphasize you can't give what you don't have.
Yeah.
And I've always had this, I recoil at parenting books and parenting tips, probably to a fault, because oftentimes what I've encountered with those things is it almost feels like people are pretending that parenting isn't hard and pretending that you can skip the process. And if you'll just take these tips and take this book and introduce these principles into your parenting, that'll make sure that your kids turn out okay.
Right.
Without ever addressing like your heart.
Yeah.
Because the most influential thing on the hearts of our children, for good or for bad, is our hearts and what comes out of us. And so if anybody's listening to this podcast going, man, I can't wait for all the parenting tips they're going to give in it, I kind of want to alleviate your hopes and dreams right out of the gate by saying it's probably not going to be full of parenting tips as much as it's going to be full of, let's talk about your relationship with Jesus and what's going on in your heart, because that inevitably will overflow into the lives of your kids. And so as I kind of talk about that, what have you guys seen or noticed about your own relationship with your kids that over the course of time has led you back to, okay, this is about me and Jesus.
Yeah.
I've got to work out what's going on in my heart, in my mind, in my soul before I ever turn around and deal with my kids. And I'll as you guys are kind of thinking about that, I'll dive into a little bit of my story. So, for me, my parents being divorced, never having my mom and dad in the same home.
You were young.
Yeah, I was super young. They were divorced, I think, before I turned 1. They were separated when I was born. Yeah. And so I don't remember a time of having both of them in the home. So not only did I not have really a roadmap for marriage, I just never really got to see one, in the wild, only the Cosby Show, which that turned out to be a train wreck underneath the surface. So, but I thought he was the best dad I'd ever seen. So, not only did I not have that for marriage, but I didn't have it really for parenting because, my mom being a single mom, I got, her perspective, the way she disciplined me and things like that. But for the majority of my growing up time, like my relationship with my dad was not really like, him disciplining me or training me or anything like that. It was more of just a friendship oriented thing, which again, I understand. Like he only had me every other weekend and for a few weeks in the summer, like he wanted to make it really fun, but at the end of the day, that didn't show me like, what's it look like on a random Tuesday when everybody's tired and they're in the home and you've got to discipline your kid. Like I just never had a real model for that. So I really stepped into parenting and marriage kind of flying blind. The one thing I had, I think, was some sheer stubbornness just to go, I'm not getting divorced and I'm going to be a good dad. Yeah. Like that was kind of my, I want to be a good husband. I want to be a good dad. And I desperately wanted to have kids and really looked forward to being a father. And so embraced that from day one, but didn't have any idea how to do it. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I've had to work through as a parent and now my older kids like to point out is that, I kind of joke about how Bo, the youngest, is kind of feral. Like we don't discipline him as much. We don't interfere with him as much. Like he gets away with a lot more than the other ones do. And the other ones like to call attention to that.
Sure.
And there's probably error on both sides. Like, one is, we're older, we're tired,
Wiser too.
Yeah, but there's also, we're more measured. And so we know what hills to die on, what hills not to die on. Yeah. So I've had to say to my kids, my older ones especially, I was too hard on you.
Sure.
And so, I've got these tattoos, grace and truth. They've been orienting for me in every part of my life, but especially in parenting and trying to figure out, when does this child need grace? When does this child need truth? And how do we interact in the middle of that is super messy. So I would say early on, I was way truth oriented, just hammer them, just over the top, like drill it down into them and less grace. And so what I found in myself was what something we'll probably get into more in this podcast and later episodes, was falling into this trap of identity parenting. So my identity being determined by my kids' behavior, especially in public, so as a pastor and things like that. And I was at a big church in Colorado that was full of grace. There wasn't a lot of judgmental people running around that place, but still I would find myself going, man, if that kid's melting down right now in front of God and everybody, what does that say about me?
Self-imposed.
And being unable to differentiate who I am from my child's behavior. Yeah. And what that does is it makes you angry. It makes you angry at your kids. So you go over the top, you get angry, and you can really back your kids into a corner and exasperate them, which is what we're told explicitly not to do in Scripture. So I had to kind of back up in parenting, and this took years and I'm still not there, trying to figure out those moments when that flares up, when, okay, this child's doing this and I'm angry about it. Am I making this about me right now? And if I'm angry, Scripture makes relatively clear, I'm disqualified from disciplining that child in that moment, because you don't want to discipline when you're in an angry place. Yeah. So trying to sort through all that has been really, really difficult over the years, and I've done it wrong probably more often than I've done it right. But it's been a good journey of trying to figure out where that comes from. So what about you guys? What stands out to y'all?
So when I was growing up, I do remember seeing, my dad would be out every morning with his Bible. I remember seeing him read the Bible. I had people in my life who modeled that, but I did not grasp the relationship side of knowing Jesus. Like, I knew the you go to church side. I knew the, we sing and we read the Bible and we pray, yes. But the why behind it and the personal side of it, which is nothing my parents did wrong. It's just something I was aware of as I had kids, going, how can I teach them that there's more than just what you're doing? There's an actual relationship side of it where he loves you and he wants to know you and you should know him. And how do you get to know him? And it's different with different ages, but my oldest had asked a lot of questions. Like, we had some deaths in the family and things like that. So I was able to talk to her a little bit about how, God's faithful and this is what his plan looks like. And we trust even when we don't know what's going on. And she was like, well, how do you know? How do you hear from him? So there were lots of conversations I got to have with her specifically that led her to know that Jesus is more than just who you read about in the Bible or talk about on Sundays. And then she was baptized last year, which is awesome. And I knew going into it, she knows what she's doing. Like, she didn't just have the right answers, which I would say when I got baptized, I had the right answers.
Right.
But it's not because I fully understood. Right. You know what I mean? Right. But she's able to talk eloquently about that. And that was one of my biggest goals, was to make sure, and I'm still trying to figure it out with my 5-year-old, because she's a whole other personality. And she's really not to the point where she's like, yeah, I totally get that. I'm like, what? She keeps saying, I want to be baptized.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what does that mean? And she goes, you go under the water. And I'm like, okay, no, we're not there yet.
Yeah, if the focus is on can I wear goggles,
right,
which is what Bo said to me a year or two ago. I don't think we're quite there yet.
Get communion finally.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, communion, it's not, it ain't all that. It didn't taste all that.
It's not.
It's not even about that.
That doesn't stop my kids from grabbing it on Sundays anyway, though, because they think it's a snack. So, but that's something that I've really wrestled with, and I think Chuck has too, modeling not just what the right things to do are, because that's what the Lord asks us to do, but modeling a real relationship with him. And it helps being, part of the music ministry here, because I can model that on stage and then I can talk about it at home and what worship is. So there's a little bit deeper dives that we can do. But, I go back and forth on that with am I doing this well? Did they actually know what I'm talking about? So just getting that to click and making sure that they know there's more than just, yes, I know the Bible stories is really important.
Yeah. Yeah, the relational side is also something you can't microwave, and so that journey you went on of your faith becoming your own is something that your parents couldn't do for you,
right.
And so that's hard as a parent to recognize, like, the one thing I want most for my kids is the one thing I can't make happen. I want them more than anything else to know and love Jesus and to have a true and authentic faith, and there's nothing I can do to make that happen, and that's hard as parents to just turn that over and go, okay, I'm going to do everything I know to do, but ultimately this is between you and them,
Yeah. Wow.
What about you, man?
I think, there's so many things that jump through my brain, but I think so much of probably what you experienced too, Scott, was that I didn't have a map. I didn't know what to do. And I'd only seen it broken. And what does it really look like? And so I started beginning to really look around. And I think God was really good to me, and I know he's been to you, to provide good, healthy, godly men and good, healthy, godly marriages. And I think that's so important for us to be able to see it, because you can read it, and some people can just get it by reading it. For me, I'm a visual learner. I like to see it, and so I like to see it happen, and I like to see it happen authentically. Whether it's perfect, that makes no difference. I mean, this whole fake it till you make it. There's none of that. That's just hypocrisy. It's going, we're going to do this authentically, and when we blow it, because we do, and we do often, we just own it. And learning how to do that from a family that did not do that is different, And so, kids are a miracle. I mean, to have children are a miracle. And for my three, and you all feel this way, they're a miracle. They're an answer to prayer. And so, as I think back on my own life and the battles that we've had with infertility, and in the backstory of my own life, being a child of a 14-year-old, and then being 30 and not being able to have kids. And just pleading with God and asking God and seeing everybody around you get pregnant and going, hey, congratulations. You just want to punch them in the face, And that's a lonely road. Miscarriages are lonely roads, and fertility is lonely roads. But to finally have these children, to be overwhelmed and to pray prayers, God, if you'll just give us a child, we'll give them back to you, And so the reality for us is we have to keep in mind that we're just stewarding them for a moment. And they don't belong to us, and that's a really hard thing, And so, doing a wedding in January, or driving a kid off to college, it's like, man, we want them to belong to Him. We want them to know that they can belong to Him. And so, how do we do that? And if we're not careful, just like I love the approach of this already, to go, it's so much more than, hey, here's a couple tips here and there that you need to do to get them to behave. It's when our kids misbehave, there's really something underneath that anyway. It's going, hey, can I just not just attack the action? Can I kind of try to move toward the heart? And can I cast a bigger story for them? Can I help them see what it is, why maybe that's wrong, but even more so, what that does to them and others when things break down.
Yeah, it's so tempting as a parent to treat symptoms instead of the root of the issue. And you can get, behavior modification. And this goes back to our own relationship with Jesus. Bonhoeffer talks a lot about this. Like, discipleship and following Jesus is not about behavior modification. That is a symptom of something much deeper. And anybody can, to your point, fake it till they make it for a little while. Right. But to really address the heart issue is a way more difficult and long-term process, and that's certainly true in parenting. The thing that my mind went to as you were talking is, you and I did kids ministry and student ministries. You did student ministry for a long time before we were parents. Yeah. So, we were experts in parenting when we were youth pastors.
It's ridiculous.
And then we had kids, and I started wanting to call people to go, man, I'm sorry.
I did a parenting workshop here. 8 weeks, no kids.
That's amazing.
People came to hear me.
That's right. That's right. Why would they listen to you?
What do I know? I had no children.
Yeah, and that is a little bit of the essence of our culture. I see two things going on at once. One is there's some people who they just want to hear from experts, because that provides some sort of comfort to go, okay, they're the expert, they must know.
Right.
And that can be a really lazy approach, to be really honest with you, to go, okay, you're just outsourcing your responsibility, because at the end of the day, you're the one who's called to be the expert about that kid.
That's it.
And you're the one who's responsible, and you're the one who's going to stand before God, Right. On the other end of the spectrum, there's this like all-out rejection of what anybody and everybody has learned anywhere, and I got it. And I would tend to err on that side of the things. To go, I don't because I'm not trusting. So if you call yourself an expert, that's the first way to get me to not listen to you.
Grow up in a little trauma, it'll get it. It'll happen.
That's right.
Absolutely.
That's right.
I don't know about that.
I'm not going to listen to you. Why would I do that? You got a badge that says principal on it. So thinking about what level of kind of pride and arrogance that took for me and you. I preached a sermon on parenting at Flatirons
Did you?
in 2000 and maybe 7 or something like that. So, Landry would have been 3,
Yeah.
4, Eli would have been 2.
Got it all
I
done.
don't know a thing,
You're just trying to survive and sleep.
And one of the elders there, had kids who were grown and everything, come up to me afterwards, and he had been a teaching pastor there for a while, kind of held down the fort. His name is Sam Williams, great man. Came up to me and said, I have as a general rule, I don't listen to anybody talk about parenting who hasn't parented through the teenage years.
Yeah. How about that?
And I kind of filed that away in that moment to go, maybe I should shut up for a little while, see if this turns out.
I mean, there's stuff you learn from student ministry and children's
He said,
ministry,
he goes, but you did a really good job. And one of the things I tried to do in that sermon was to kind of humbly go, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
All I know is this is what
I
the
need
Bible
Jesus
tells
bad.
us is our responsibility.
Yeah.
So that responsibility side of things, and Weiss has always done a great job. One of the first things he told me when I came back here in 2017, we were just talking about parenting, was, Scott, you got to parent to the personality.
Yeah.
You've just reflected
Yes.
that. Like, you have 2 that are very different.
Very different.
I've got
Yeah.
Figure out
4
that
that are all
5-year-old.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the problem with referring to experts is a lot of times there's this uniformity that goes, here's just do this, and you're like, well, okay, maybe that worked with your 1 kid, but it ain't going to work with my 4.
Right.
So we've got to back up
The
further.
methods are different.
Yeah.
They just are. It doesn't mean that the principles or the truth of the command or whatever those things are not there, but it's how do you build the right bridge to that specific kiddo?
Yeah.
Because they're different.
Yeah.
I feel like I learned that lesson early with potty training.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, do it in 3 days. It did not work for either of my kids,
Yeah.
and the
Don't
same
you just
method
love
did not
people
work
that
for
tell you
both
stuff?
of them.
Isn't that funny? Because I remember that, like, Allie took that approach with a few of the kids, like, because somebody told her, like, if you'll just, be real
Yes.
stubborn, like, just don't leave the house for 3 days,
Yeah.
just be diligent, it'll be done, and I'll never forget Bo, of course, last one.
Yeah.
And
He's going to be your best kid because
gosh.
you're the best parent.
he got to the point where, he would go get his diaper, the wipes, and the changing pad, lay it all out,
Do it.
and then lay down. And go,
Take care of me.
Yeah, like, hey, man, so if you can do all that,
Yeah.
that's way more steps.
Yeah.
You've thought this through. You're clearly...
Sit on it, man.
Yeah,
or stand and
I've
do
got
it.
a picture of it somewhere. I'll
That's
show you
pretty
guys where
funny.
he's literally laying in front of me on the floor. And I just took his picture. I'm like, you little, And it's like, he wasn't gonna.
Sure.
You could have locked him up for
Yeah.
a year. He was just wasn't gonna do it till he was ready.
Exactly.
But kids are different, and if you try to employ the same methodologies, that's why people always look and go, man, how'd those kids grow up in the same house?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Under the same parents.
Yeah,
You're
in a
the
way,
same
that's
things.
a picture of the church, though.
Yeah.
We're all in the same house.
Yeah.
Look at us.
Yeah. Yeah. We're all a mess.
That's right.
Yeah.
What other, kind of moments along the way kind of made you realize, like, okay, I've got to depend upon, strength of Jesus,
Yeah.
Holy Spirit, got to look in His Word, because this is going to be really, really challenging or really, really difficult. You just said potty training. Any others that stand
Well,
out?
this may be very superficial, but sleep deprivation is not my favorite thing, and it's not my husband's favorite thing. So, and it sounds silly, but it's true. If I did not have moments of peace to myself to be able to focus on the right thing and get my heart checked, I was a mess.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't tend to be angry. Like, I tend to be a more go with the flow person, but
That's how she's
being
different than us.
tired, man. But being tired brings out the unhealth in me.
Does that to everybody.
Yeah. So there was a lot of me realizing, like, why am I in such a mood all the time? And it's not my kids' fault. They can't help it. But I'm not actually doing what I need to do to make sure that I can be patient or do whatever it is that I need. So that was a struggle. Sometimes still is, to be honest.
Oh man, sleep deprivation is brutal. Make you crazy. Make you
Yes.
feel like you're crazy. You will be crazy.
Yes.
I mean, there's a reason it's a torture method.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And
Yes.
they use, and what do they use? A crying baby sound to keep
right.
you.
Well, and then you add hormones into it. From my perspective, I've had moments early on where I'm like, everything I'm saying is nuts. I'm fully aware, and I can't stop.
Can't turn that valve
That
off.
has
Pedal to
happened.
the metal.
I'm just that stubborn, and I was going. So yeah.
When we had our 2, they're 6.5 months apart. One's
Yeah,
adopted,
man.
and we were living out here at this house on the property, and all three of our kids struggled to sleep good. All 3. We tried everything. We've called sleep experts. We spent money, like I don't know, it's like $80 an hour to talk to people. That I've had people tell me, "Okay, this is what you got to do. This is what you got to leave them alone. You got to do. You got to do this." And it's like people that don't have kids tell me. I'm just like,
People who don't have kids.
again, shut your face.
Yeah, that's right.
But I mean, I remember being so exhausted because they were in different seasons. You got Evie who's here, and she's now 4, 5, 6 months old, and you've got or 6, and then Emmy's born, and so Evie's getting teeth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Emmy's coming home,
and that was being born.
yeah. And I mean they're on different schedules.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we're exhausted. I mean, it's like Walking Dead. And I'm serving in Danville, and graciously to get to do that. But man, you come home and you're up. You're always up. It feels like one's like they're talking. It's like, hey, listen,
It's conspiring.
I got 12:30. You got
That's
2.
right.
Yes.
Yeah. How can we disrupt them?
Let's destroy them. It's like what you can't even walk yet.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
right.
I remember walking down here into the office and I saw Miss Johnson. She has twins. They're now grown.
Yep.
Yeah. Karen
And she
Casey.
said, "How are you doing?" I said, "We're pretty tired." I said, "Listen, there's no need for Guantanamo Bay. Just bring the terrorists to my house. After 2 days, they'll tell you everything that they know." And then she said, "Scott, just wait till they're 4."
Yeah, like why are you crushing my soul
And I was
right
like,
now?
4.
Yeah.
4. They're not even 1. I mean,
Right.
it was unbelievable. And I don't know when it clicked, but eventually, it just does. And you figure out how to help each other. But you're mean to your spouse, you're mean to your kids. I mean, there are moments where it's just like I'm literally trying to make them, they're standing in their crib, screaming. And you're literally trying to hold them down.
Yeah,
You wanna
nobody
choke 'em
understands
out.
"Don't shake a baby" commercials till you have one.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh, we need that warning. Don't shake that baby."
Yeah.
I will never forget. Silas was about to be born, so he's number 3. He's 14 now, and we'd just been through Landry, Eli, and Eli still wasn't sleeping really well through the night, that kind of thing. Landry was. She was like 4, and all of a sudden she decided not to want to go to bed at night, and we couldn't figure out what it was, and it lasted felt like forever. Maybe it was just a few weeks or a month. I don't know. But it became this huge ordeal. And she would not go to bed. She would, if we get her down, she'd wake back up. She just wouldn't sleep. So then we got the other one over there, and Allie's about to have this one. And so I remember just like literally just like going, God, this is not possible. Like, it's not possible.
Yeah.
Take it away.
Yeah.
Remove
Gotta
the
walk
thorn.
outside. And he says, "My grace is sufficient."
I'm going,
for
no,
you.
I don't
My
want
strength
grace.
is
I
made
just want him to
perfect in your
sleep.
weakness. That's right.
And I brought it up in a staff meeting. This was back when we were small enough church. We'd have a staff meeting every week with everybody on staff, just going, "Anybody got any tips?" Like, and everybody's coming to my office giving me their tips. I'm like, "I've tried it." So,
Can you put Benadryl in a bottle?
yeah,
I don't know.
exactly.
I'm pretty sure my parents did that because I was a talker. So.
Absolutely. So the takeaway, I think, pretty quickly early on is like you're way outside of your capabilities.
beyond you.
And I think I probably told this story on a podcast at some point. I've done too many to remember, but when Allie had Eli, the first time she was going to go, so this is our second child, and we were living in Nicholasville. The first time she was going to go hang out with some friends after we brought him home from the hospital, he was a few weeks old, and it was cold. He was born in February. She's upstairs. I'm downstairs, and I'm holding Eli, and Landry's upstairs with Allie. She's getting ready. She was getting ready in front of this full-length mirror, and at the time we had a bassinet in the bedroom with us for Eli, and we had a space heater in there because it was so cold. Yeah. She turned to walk back towards the bed, I think to get Landry off the bed or something like that. And she got her feet tangled in the cord for the space heater, fell, and landed on both her arms. Well, people who have just had a baby, their bones are still not quite what they used to be. So she breaks both her arms.
Oh, my gosh.
And so she ends up she had to have surgery on one, have some screws put in. And so she ends up in these, they didn't put her in full cast, but they were like these braces that she had this limited amount of.
Like she'd had a ski accident.
Yeah. And she's walking out of Lexington Clinic after we get the x-rays. And it's, later at night now. And my mom walked out, or was walking out at the same time because we needed help. Yeah. I just remember looking at my mom going, I don't know how we're going to do this,
Yeah.
And that's the way all of parenting feels to me. Like I don't know how we're going to do this.
Yeah.
And she looked at me, and we're all just kind of going, I don't either, but somehow we're going to figure this out. And really what ended up happening was the church came alongside of us. And I mean, people took rotations. And I remember people coming to the house to physically hold Eli, put him in her lap so she could breastfeed him with these big, it required all hands on deck. And to your point of the sleep thing and having to take time for yourself, like I'm here, I'm doing student ministries and I'm stepping into this role that I want to do really well in, taking the baton from this man over here, then going, I can't just let everything fall. And so I remember we took these rotations where Allie's mom would come over and she would stay up with Eli for the first 4 hours, and then I would do the second 4 hours or vice versa. Because what I kind of said was, if I can just get 4 hours, just 4 hours of uninterrupted sleep, I think I can not die, which was like the baseline. I think I'll maybe live through this. And so, about a month and a half later, like coming out the other side of it going, man, if we hadn't have figured that out, navigated, okay, how do I make sure I don't lose my mind in this process? How do we provide opportunities for each of us to get a break and a breather so that we can bring some semblance of sanity into the situation? But man, back to the whole premise of reliance upon God going, this is way outside of my comfort zone. It's beyond what I'm capable of. The only way I'm going to be able to do this is if you give me what I need for each day. And I think if we take that posture into parenting, because, for anybody who's listening to this thinking, it'll get easier when they're 4, or to get easier when they're 12, or to get easier when they're 19, or to get hate to break it to you, each new season brings its unique challenges. So
blessings and hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Memories that are great, challenges that are hard, things that you hoped you'd never have to deal with, all those things. But you move from different seasons of tired, And I remember my mom saying when Landry was born, you'll never sleep soundly another day in your life. And I remember thinking, well, that's kind of doom and gloom. And also that sounds true. I remember saying that. I quoted her in a sermon once years and years ago and made some people really mad. And they're like, well, that's just not true. Parenting's a joy. Like, you're missing the point. Of course it's a joy. But, when someone says having another human, who's your child is like having your heart walk around in somebody else's body. That's exactly the point, So your ability to totally decompress and rest, and that just goes away. It's part of what we sign up for. But there's beauty in it as well, which requires that reliance on a daily basis.
We've been praying. I've been praying this prayer for my kids from the jump before they were born. Just, God, would you help them fall in love with you early, walk with you all the days of their life. May they be dangerous women who go where you want them to go, do what you want them to do, say what you want them to say, to make their life count for you and for the kingdom. And then they come, and these are babies that have bodies, but they are souls with a body. And God goes, hey, I want you to raise them, just like what Moses is talking about. I need you to get it right with me, and then I need you to help them get it right with me. And most of that's going to be by the way that you show them, not just in what you tell them, but do they see that in us? What do they see are important? What are our values? What seems to take our time? What brings us the most joy? How much of life is about us? Because, the reality is once you get married and once you have kids, you realize just how selfish you are. I mean, I still have to battle me, and going, how do I help them meet this God in the context of not really having a good, solid dad, and now learning what it means to have a really perfect Heavenly Father who loves me and who has adopted me? How do I do that? And how do I shower them with the right type of, and not that it was this way bad, and then you go all the way over here and you do it wrongly because you swung the pendulum so far, but go, no, what's right for them? How do I help affirm them, encourage them, and breathe life into them, and help them to see things, and begin to teach not just how to be great kids, but how to be great people that love God, love people, and eventually will leave home and chase God's purposes for their life. And some of that's on me. And on us, and some of that's not on us. I mean, at the end of the day, it's hard because we got some people that are going to listen to these podcasts that have prodigal kids, or kids that just have been resistant, or they've grown up around all the woke, or they've seen and experienced all these other things, or they've had church hurt, or whatever that is, and it's going. It's our job simply to be faithful and to trust and to impart and impress the things that we can, begging God to move their heart to a place where they begin to see Him for who He is and what He wants to do in their life. And so that's so critical for us, man.
Yeah, I've taken great comfort in, Luke 15 in so many different ways.
Yeah.
Jesus tells the story of the prodigal son. And as I've grown as a parent, where I've, gravitated towards is like, okay, if God's the perfect father and he has prodigal sons and daughters, that's not all a reflection on who we are and what we've done or not done.
Right.
It's because they are individuals and they are going to wrestle and struggle with sin. And so that should just make us, again, even more independent or more dependent on our Heavenly Father and our relationship.
Yeah. My mom used to say, kids are your greatest joy and your greatest disappointment. Which I don't know what that says about me.
Did you say that a lot?
She aired on the joy side, obviously.
Of course.
But experiencing that in a couple of different facets has been interesting. So, with my kids, we've not really reached the point where like I've been horrendously disappointed by anything, but you do experience things that you sacrifice that nobody really tells you about on the front end when you're going to have kids. But then also looking at family dynamics, like my husband's family, his brother is somewhat estranged from the family, but his family was very similar to mine in that they grew up in church, and they were raised with the same values that Scripture talks about, and they knew who Jesus was, and he just made his own decision based on things that happened in his life and people that he met, and said, you know what, I don't think this is for me.
Yeah.
So trying to figure that out, there's been a lot of blame. I think my mother-in-law's kind of looked at herself and gone, oh gosh, what did I do? And I'm like, it's not you.
Yeah.
So hard not to look in the mirror and take that, And there's value in reflection, but there's not value in taking responsibility for other people's decisions that weren't yours.
Right.
The guilt train will always come back. Satan's driving
exactly.
it. All aboard.
A great question to ask in those moments, I think, is who would say that to me? Like who would whisper that in my ear that this is your fault? Does that sound like Jesus?
Right.
Or does that sound like Satan?
Exactly.
It sounds a lot like Satan to me because he's the accuser and Jesus came to remove all the accusation and to take from us. So that's always been helpful for me as a parent when I'm kind of hearing those messages in my ear that just want to destroy me, put me in a place of fear and all that, is to go, who's whispering this in my ear right now?
Yeah, and I think going back to carving out time to develop your own relationship with the Lord, it's critical to identifying that voice as not being from the Lord, because otherwise you will believe anything you hear, whether that's a person or it's just the enemy whispering in your ear. But you have to be grounded in what God says and who he is.
Yeah, and the only way to do that is in the Bible, and so there's no shortcut to that. And so again, as parents, you can't give what you don't have. So your relationship with Jesus, and we know this to be true. People say it all the time in marriage, like, hey, if you don't have the best marriage, each of you run hard after Jesus and then look to your right, look to your left and go, oh, there she is, there he is. They're running hard after Jesus too. The best thing I can give my wife is to run hard after Jesus. The best thing I can give my kids is to run hard after Jesus, But if I turn and focus all my attention on her or them or him, that... And that takes away from, then all of a sudden we can
good
all
thing,
go off
ultimate
course.
thing.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And kids, spouses, anybody, can be good things, but if you make them ultimate thing, they'll become destructive. And kids make terrible gods and all that stuff that we've talked about and we'll get into more. But, well, this is a great introduction. So wanted to give everybody a little bit of a taste for what this will be like, a little flavor. And
I'm so glad that you're doing this.
Yeah.
This is going to be so important for our church. I think sometimes people look at you all, or you guys are on stage all the time. They think that we are perfect parents, and we're not. We're completely dependent upon the Lord, and we are imperfect at all times and need his help and his grace. And so, and whether you're a single parent or you're new to Christ, or you're wrestling through all of this, or you've got a teenager, or you're trying to get, whatever that is, I think there's going to be some real good encouragement and challenge for parents, man. It's the hardest job.
Yeah.
It's the hardest job.
Yeah.
But there's help and there's hope, we can do it.
And we'll cover some of those things as examples and stories and things like that may or may not be helpful for people, but we'll always try to back it up to the principles that should drive everything we do that come directly from Scripture. and we'll not spend a ton of time on, well, here's what you need to do to potty train, you know.
That's right.
So again, you can go check that out at the self-help section, and then you can throw it in the fireplace
when it doesn't work.
That's right.
Save your money.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, hey everybody, you know, as I just said, this podcast won't be full of parenting tips. It'll be a lot harder than that. We'll focus on you and your heart first and your relationship with Jesus. And so if that sounds like a journey you want to go on, then check us out next time on Southland's creatively titled Parenting Podcast. Peace out.